Morning, all. I'm Nathan Smith, and I'm the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thank you so much for joining me this morning for Microsoft Word Part 1, the basics. Just quickly, I'm sure most of you already know, but just to make sure this is said, since this is Part 1, there's a Part 2 that happens next week. And it's going to build directly on what we're talking about. Well, directly. All you need to know for next week's session is the stuff you'll learn in this week's session. And so, if you're on the fence about whether the next session is going to be for you or whether you'll be able to follow it, it is, and you will. So definitely. If you have the chance, if you haven't already registered for next week, go ahead and get in there, and hopefully, and I will be delighted to have you then as well. Couple of other things to get out of the way here. There's a ton of other events happening. If you are, if you head to cals.org and move your mouse over events, you'll see a bunch of different things. Including, you'll see there's a technology classes selection up there, so you can see the other technology classes that are coming up, and you can also check out the other live events that are happening. You can, if you want to see all of them, you can just click on the little thing that says search for an event online, and that will that'll show you everything. Tons of cool stuff. So definitely check it out. Join us for any and all of that. So yeah. Other things, at the beginning of every class, I like to make sure and encourage folks to ask questions when they have them. The point of a technology class, of course, if you think about it, is for folks to learn something useful about technology. So if you are learning something useful about technology, even if you're asking me questions, and that's things I didn't necessarily plan for, stuff like that, that's a successful class, in my opinion, is when you're getting the information you need about technology so that you can use that information to do the stuff you need to do and make your life better and things like that. An unsuccessful class, in my opinion, is when, for example, you are confused about what I'm saying and you sit there and you don't ask any questions about it, and you just and whatever I'm saying just kind of goes in one ear and out the other, and you don't learn anything. In that situation, we might as well just call it off. There's other stuff that I can be doing. There's other stuff that you can be doing. We can all make our lives a little bit better if we don't bother with an unsuccessful technology class like that. So if you have questions, very important, speak up and let me know. Don't worry about whether it's kind of a silly question. Don't worry about whether it's a rabbit trail. I'm not concerned about that. I want to make sure that your questions get addressed and that you come away having learned something really useful. So ask those questions when you have them. But how do I do that? Well, thankfully, that part's pretty easy. If you're joining me on Zoom and you are on a computer, all you need to do is head down to the bottom of your Zoom window with your mouse and click on the little speech bubble that says chat. When you click there, you should see the little chat panel pop up, and you should be able to type your questions right in there and press enter to send them to me. If you are joining me in Zoom and you're on a mobile device, that's pretty easy too. All you need to do is tap on the screen, usually probably somewhere in the middle, and you'll see kind of some options pop up on the like around the top and bottom. Look for an option probably in the corner that's going to be labeled More. Tap on that, and you should see chat in the menu that pops up. When you tap on that, you should be able to type your question in and send it to me. No big deal. If you're joining me on Facebook or YouTube, then the way to do it on Facebook, you'll want to use the live chat that's just to the right of my video. And on, on YouTube, you'll want to use the live chat that's just to the right of my video. On Facebook, you'll want to use the comments, just like you would on any other post, and I'll see those questions and be able to address those as well. All right. Oh, also, if there are technical difficulties, oh, please let me know about that. I don't want to be sitting here talking into a mic that's not working or trying to demonstrate software, but you can't actually see what I'm doing. That's not going to work. So make sure if there are technical difficulties that you let me know right away, so that way we can avoid wasting our time and we can make the most of it. Cool. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm gonna fire up the screen sharing here, and we'll get things rolling. All right, there you are, Microsoft Word, share. Okay, cool. All right, now I am in my Word window, and I'm ready to go there. So here, what I'm going to, when I first open this up, it's going to, when I first open up Word, it's going to give me a screen kind of like this. This is sort of the start screen in Word. It's a little weird because if you're using, because it doesn't open up directly to a new document or to an existing one that you were working on. It opens up to this instead. This will look a little bit different just depending on what version of Microsoft Word you're using. The version I'm using, by the way, is the Microsoft Office 365 version, which is kind of the newest version, and it has a few bells and whistles that you might not have on previous versions of Word, but everything we're going to talk about today is applicable to almost any version of Word. I would say going back at least to Word 2010 or perhaps even earlier. So if you have an earlier version of Word, there might be a few cosmetic differences, but you really won't see anything that's all that terribly different. Give me just a moment. Let me. All right. Tea is ready. So here I am on this starter screen. Basically, we have a few things. Up here at the top, we have what are called templates. Basically, these are sort of pre-made documents where you can kind of fill in the blanks or like replace the sort of placeholder information that they give you with something that's related directly to the document that you're writing, so that you don't have to start from a completely blank piece of paper, virtual paper. You also have down here at the bottom a list of recent documents. So these are documents that I've had open over the past little while. And so I can look through, if I want to get back to a document that I've been working on before, then I can go in here and just click on it to open it right up, and that's handy. I also have the ability over here on the left to create a new document or click open to open an existing one that's stored on my computer but that I haven't opened in a while. And I have a few additional options here. Account for dealing with my Microsoft account. Feedback if I encounter a problem with Word and I want to report that issue. And then options, which changes essentially the default settings of Word. I haven't found myself needing to do that terribly often, but that is something that you can do. If you're like, oh, I wonder if it can do this, you might look in those options to see. But let's go ahead and start with a blank document and go from there. So up here at the top, in amongst these templates is a little thing that just says blank document. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to open up the sort of main Word window here. Let's talk about the layout here, so that way you know where to look for things as we move forward. So up at the top, at the very top, we have a few things. First, we're going to start in the top left corner with what we call the Quick Access Toolbar. The Quick Access Toolbar is basically just a little space where, let's see. Okay, so someone's asking a question here in the chat. Trying to pull up this document and I'm getting a blank page. So we are starting with a blank page. Are you talking about a completely blank screen? Because yeah, all I have up here is a blank page. There's no, we're not working off of an example file or anything today. We're just starting with a blank document. Okay, good. All right, yeah, you got it. You're doing great. Okay, up here on the left is what we call the Quick Access Toolbar. The Quick Access Toolbar is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a set of a few little shortcuts that you can use to quickly jump or to quickly employ certain types of options. So up here at the top, we have a little autosave switch here. This will only appear on somewhat newer versions of Word, I believe 2016 and onward. And those versions, the only time that this autosave feature will actually work is if your files are stored online, specifically if they're stored in some Microsoft kind of online storage. And that's going to either be your Microsoft OneDrive if you are working on your own, or if you're using your own, or if you're using your sort of individual OneDrive storage, if you have it through work or something, or Microsoft SharePoint, which is usually set up through your work, and it's kind of a centralized place where people can store files and information that other staff might need access to. So if you have a file that's stored on in one of those two places, essentially, then this autosave feature will work, and it'll save your work as you go, which is kind of nice, because then you don't have to worry about updating the file manually every so often. But of course, there are downsides to that. If your work's being auto-saved and then you realize, oh, I made a bunch of changes I don't want to keep, then it's harder to get back to an older version of the document. If it's just stored on your computer, you can just not save and close the document and then reopen it, and it'll be, and only the changes since the last time you saved it will show up there. So the autosave is kind of a mixed bag. You do want to be aware of whether it's on or not, so that way you can know whether to save. Speaking of which, we have this little disk icon here, and that's the save button. If you click on that save button, what it's going to do, if you are starting with a blank file like we are right now, it's going to trigger what's called the save as function. Save as will basically prompt you to name your document and give it a place to live on your computer. So you can, you choose a folder essentially where the document is stored, and you give it a name. Right now I have a placeholder name here, document 2, but I can change that or by saving the document somewhere. So you give it a name and you give it a folder to live in, and then once you do that, if you click this button again, it's just going to update the existing file with any changes you've made since the last time you saved. So that makes it pretty easy. And really, you're not even going to see anything happen on screen if it's just saving to, if it's just doing a regular save like that and updating an existing file. So you can just click it and then move on with whatever you're doing in your document. Next to that, we have 2 additional buttons here, and these exist, well, particularly this one, exists because we're all human and we all make mistakes. when you make a mistake, you can use this undo feature to undo the change that you just made, whatever the last action was that you took. For example, let's say that I delete a paragraph from my document. And then I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to delete that paragraph. I can go up here, click the undo button, or use the keyboard shortcut Control Z, either way works, to undo that action that I just took, and that will bring back the paragraph that I deleted. Yay. If I make multiple mistakes in a row, and who among us hasn't done that, then I can undo multiple steps by clicking the undo button multiple times. So if I, let's say I delete a paragraph and then I change the color of some text, and then I add in a picture. And I'm like, I don't really need that picture. I want the text back the way it was, and I need that paragraph back. I can click the undo button 3 times, and it will undo each of those steps in reverse chronological order, basically. So it will undo the latest thing first, and then the next to latest thing, and then the next to latest thing. So it will remove the picture, change the color back, and then bring back the paragraph that I deleted. So yay, all of that, I've got all that the way I want it to be. So that's the undo button, super duper helpful because, as I said, we all make mistakes from time to time. And so that way you can do a little time travel. There's also kind of an opposite button, which is the repeat button right here. Whenever I take an action, clicking the repeat button will do that action again. For example, if I change the color of some text to blue, then I can go down in my document somewhere else where I want blue text, select that text, and just click the repeat button to change that text to blue as well. That's really handy. So I can use that to undo, I can use that to, or I can use that to do an action repeatedly over and over again without having to make sure everything's the same every time and so on and so forth. So that's handy. After I hit undo, though, this repeat button becomes the redo button, and it looks exactly like the undo button. The undo button's grayed out a little bit, but it's, it's kind of this, this arrow that's sort of curving off to the left. Instead of the repeat button, after I've clicked undo, I'll get the redo button. And the redo button undoes your undoing. So let's say that I made those 3 mistakes, and I was clicking the undo button to reverse them. But instead of clicking undo 3 times, because I was in a hurry or I was anxious to get the document back the way I want it to be, I accidentally clicked the undo button 5 times. Well, in addition to 3 actions that I intended to undo, there were 2 actions that I've undone that I intended to keep. Oops. So all I need to do, thankfully, is click the redo button twice, and that will undo my undoing for both of those actions. The only trick with the redo button is, much like a time travel movie, once you go back and change the past, the future will never be what it once was. So if you click undo, particularly several times, and then you go in and make other changes to your document, and then you notice, oh no, I undid some work I intended to keep, let me redo it, it's too late. You can only use redo as the last action after undo. So, so you want to make sure, particularly if you click undo multiple times in a row, that you check over your work first and just make sure you didn't undo any work you intended to keep. If you did, go ahead and use the redo button right then. If you didn't undo any work you intended to keep, if it's exactly the way you need it to be, then move on. So that's undo, redo, and repeat. Finally, with the quick access toolbar, there's a little drop-down arrow right here. You can use this to select some other options that you can add to the quick access toolbar. And you can even click more commands here at the top, which will allow you, or here near the bottom of the menu, which will allow you to add pretty much any action you can take in all of Word to that quick access toolbar. Over here to the side of that, we have the name of our document and then the name of the program, and just in case you forgot. And then we have a little search box here where you can search for help or perhaps even different files. I'm not 100% on that, but maybe. All right. And then down below, we have this area that's known as the ribbon. The ribbon is a design concept that Microsoft likes an awful lot. They are, honestly, I don't blame them. It's pretty useful. The way I like to think about it is, if you think about those, like those big, like if you've ever been to a mechanic shop or a wood shop, somewhere like that, where they have a lot of tools, a lot of times they have those big old tool chests with a bunch of drawers in them, right? And if they're pretty well organized, then maybe they have a drawer for the wrenches and a drawer for the screwdrivers and a drawer for the ratchets and so on and so forth. With the idea being, if they need a particular tool, they just go over to the tool chest, slide out the drawer they need, grab the tool, close it up, and get right back to work. Rather than having to dig through a big old pile of tools or hunt through 5 different toolboxes or, whatever. And that makes it really handy because they can, they can find the tools quickly and they're in a logical place where they kind of, where the person kind of expects them to be. The ribbon is the same thing, but for what we call commands in Microsoft products. And commands are just basically the tools that a piece of software gives you. So the commands, so on the Home tab here, which is where we start, we have kind of basic commands that you use a lot working in Word. And we're going to talk about a lot of these as we move forward. Some of this stuff we're going to be talking about, most of this stuff we're going to be talking about today. And a lot of this stuff over here, we're going to be talking about next week in part 2. So a lot of useful things that you want close at hand, essentially, while you're working in Word. But if I click the Insert tab, you'll notice all my set of tools here changes, and now I have other stuff. The Insert tab contains commands that allow you to, as you might imagine, insert things into your document. So you can insert a table, a picture, a link to a website, a whole bunch of things, and we'll talk about some of those here a little later. The Design tab here gives you a bunch of options to figure out what your or to make your document look exactly the way you want it to look. We're going to talk about this Design tab in depth next week in part 2. It's really, really useful. I definitely encourage you to join me for that so that you can learn about that. The Layout tab here. By the way, some of these tabs differ slightly in different versions of Word. There's like a page layout tab in certain versions and some different things like that. So we'll see. You might find things in a slightly different place just depending on what version of Word you have, but it should be basically the same. So the Layout tab or page layout in older versions of Word controls things like the size of your page, the margins, the orientation, essentially whether it's like this or like this, portrait or landscape, and a whole bunch of other stuff like that. Under the References tab here, you basically can cite your sources. Very, very important if you're writing anything that's nonfiction. You want to make sure you can't be accused of plagiarism. And obviously, you also don't want to do plagiarism. So you can use the References tab to cite your sources and point people towards where you got your information. Mailings here, the Mailings tab is primarily focused on giving you the ability to do what's called a mail merge. Mail merges are something that we'll talk about next week as well. And they're really, really cool. Basically, you can make a personalized version of your document for each recipient. So it's pretty snazzy and it saves you a lot of time and is a it's a pretty easy way to make your document feel a lot more personal to the people who are receiving it, and so on and so forth. The review tab here, whoops, spilled a little tea there. The review tab here basically allows you to check your work for errors and also collaborate with other people. So we'll talk about some of those features a little bit later as well. Actually, next week, we'll talk about a lot of that. But you have things like the editor or spell check, the thesaurus, so that you don't overuse a particular word, and the word count box here. The view tab here allows you to change how you're seeing your document without actually changing the contents of it. Things like zoom are here, also the ruler and some other stuff like that. These grid lines, which are very distracting, and so on and so forth. You can also zoom down here at the bottom. So I can drag this little slider down at the bottom right, and that'll allow me to zoom in on the page. And I am going to do that so that way it's a little easier for everybody to see. Then there are also some other tabs here. The developer tab you can show or hide, and it has some advanced options that we're not really going to be digging into here in the class. The help tab here has links to various help information, the ability to contact Microsoft support, the help documentation, feedback if you run into a problem or a bug, and stuff like that. And then I also have an Acrobat tab up here. That's because I have Adobe Acrobat installed on my computer, but frankly, you probably don't, and you don't need this, and we're going to pretend that it doesn't exist from here on out. Okay, so finally, over here on the left is the File tab. If I click on the File tab, it gives me what's called the Backstage view, which is very similar to our starting screen that we picked up on at first here. So we have Home, that'll show you kind of this view. New, which allows you to create a new document. Open, which allows you to open an existing document on your computer or in your online storage. Info, which shows you what we call metadata, basic information about your Word document as a file rather than the contents of it, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Save and save as. Print is down here. Share, so you can send your document to folks online and so forth. Close, which allows you to close the document without closing Word. Make sure you don't click on that. Or if you do, then you'll probably just end up back here, and you can click Home and create a new blank document. But one other thing I want to point out is this export option here. In the export, again, I have this because I have Adobe Acrobat installed on this computer. But down here is create PDF/XPS document, and that's the default option that you'll find here. In certain situations, when you create a document for other people, particularly if you're sending it to them digitally rather than printing it out and sending it to them or giving it to them or whatever. Sometimes you may want to take advantage of this option here to create a PDF document. So they give you the option of XPS because Microsoft created this format called XPS. I don't use it, and I don't recommend that you do either. PDF documents, however, are extremely useful sometimes. Basically, as it says, it preserves the layout, formatting, fonts, and images. So what's going to happen is almost any device with a screen can open a PDF document. And when they do, it's going to look exactly the way you set it up. Whereas if somebody tries to open a Microsoft Word file, it's a little hit or miss. If they have the same version of Word installed on their computer as you, and they have the same fonts, the same look for the characters. We'll talk about fonts a little bit later. Set up on their computer and all that stuff, then your document will probably look the same or similar. But if that's not the case, if say you create a document on your Windows computer, and then you send it to your friend who's going to open it on an iPad, they might have more of a problem opening it up and seeing exactly what you're seeing the way you wanted it to be seen. So if that's the situation, then it can become, then it can become a problem. Your document might not look the way you intended it to look. And so, and particularly if it's something like sending your resume to a potential employer or something like that, that's not good. And you want to make sure that you want it to look exactly the way you set it up. So if that's the case, you can come in here, create a PDF version of your document. And what that's going to be is essentially just like a static version. You can't go in and change the PDF file itself unless you have some expensive software. And so it's almost like printing it out. But that's a good thing, because if you're printing it into a PDF file, then it'll look exactly the way you intended on the other end, whether they're opening it on a computer that's exactly like yours, or they're looking at it on their phone or tablet, or whatever. So I just wanted to point that out. This is a really useful feature to use sometimes. Anytime you're sending something like a resume or cover letter to a prospective employer, then you usually will want to send it as a PDF file unless they specify a different type of format that they prefer. But that's going to make sure it looks exactly the way you designed it. Okay, anyway. I'm going to click this left arrow up here at the top, and that's going to take me back to the main Word screen. Let's see. Okay. Someone says, my export, close, share, and save as are not lighting up. Others are available, like account. It sounds like maybe you clicked close over there in the menu. So click on new. So up in this backstage area, click on new and do blank document. And that should give you a new blank document. There we go. Yeah. Because what it's acting like is that there's no file open. Okay, good. Excellent. So let's dive in and let's start doing a little bit of writing here. I'm going to write a paragraph of nonsense. You don't have to write the same thing that I do. In fact, I don't encourage you to try and get it just like I have it, because that'll take time. I don't want you to focus on that. What we're doing is just getting a little text in here that we can play around with. So here I go. Okay, there we go. Nice. Okay, so I have I've got a little paragraph here. few things to point out here. First of all, for anybody who's, for anybody who hasn't done much of this at all, when I get to the end of a line, I don't have to do anything to come down here to the next line. All I have to do is keep typing, and it wraps on around. And once a line fills up, then the next word is just going to show up on the next line here. Another thing to point out, back when I was in, say, elementary school or so, they would tell you at the beginning of each paragraph, you should indent a little bit like this. Whoops, wrong button. Like that. And that is not necessary anymore. You don't need to do that when you're writing a document in Word, unless you're working with, unless there's some specific style guide that you're supposed to follow that that says otherwise. Obviously, for folks who are doing assignments for school or things like that, or have who are publishing, say, professional papers, there are certain formatting conventions that you have to follow. But for everybody else, don't bother with indenting at the beginning of your paragraph. It's not necessary anymore for reasons that we'll talk about later. And finally, just the nature of a paragraph in Word. So when I start typing here, as long as I keep going, Word considers all of this to be one paragraph. Once I press Enter on my keyboard, you'll notice it comes down here. It makes a little gap right there. And then I can start typing a new paragraph. But anytime you hit Enter or Return, if you're on a Mac, then you're going to create a little gap here, which is why you don't have to indent at the beginning of a paragraph. And Word considers this to be a new paragraph. So I've got my two paragraphs here. Even if I just go down here and go press Enter, Word considers this to be a paragraph. So we're not going by grammar rules. We're going by Word's sort of internal rules. All right, excellent. So I've got my text here. Let's go ahead and play around a little bit with formatting. So up here at the top, under the Home tab, if you don't see these options that I'm about to talk about, you may need to click on the Home tab to get back to it if you've clicked through some of the others. But I have this font area up here at the top. Well, actually, before we start making these changes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some text. So, excuse me, my goodness. So when I talk about, when I have text that I want to make changes to, particularly if I want to make changes to a lot of text at once, I usually want to select it, is what we say. To select something, I mean, obviously it just means to pick something, just like you would, just like you might use that word in other contexts. To do it, what I'm going to do is take my mouse and move it here. I'm going to click and hold near the text. I'm going to get this sentence right here. I'm going to click and hold with my mouse button near the text. And I'm just going to, while I'm continuing to hold down the button, move my mouse so that it selects the whole sentence right there. And it's shaded in gray. That text, I would say, is now selected. And so I can make changes to it, all at once. So let's make some of those changes. Up here at the top in this font area, it says Calibri, and then the word body in parentheses here. The word body in parentheses, we'll talk about why that's happening next week when we talk about styles. But for now, just know that that's not a part of the name of the font. When I click here, you'll notice it just says Calibri now. There's Calibri Light. There are some recently used fonts, and then there are all fonts listed in alphabetical order. So when we say fonts, what we're talking about is the look of the different characters, the letters, the numbers, the symbols, as you type. So this is Calibri, the default font. But if I come down here, I could choose, say, Harlow Solid Italic. When I click on that, then my text changes to look completely different. The S is this kind of squiggly mess, and sort of looks like a neon sign almost. And I can choose from a whole bunch of different options here. Let's see here. I'll choose, oh, I don't know. And you may not have the same fonts as me on your computer. That's totally fine. It's nothing to worry about. I'll choose this one, Playbill, for now. So there we have it. So you can use that to change the look and feel of the text in your document. You don't want to go too overboard with this. A lot of folks, when they find out they can change the font, they're like, oh, I'm going to use 6 different fonts and it's going to be so cool. It's not cool. It's not cool at all. When you're designing, you want to use your document, you want to use an absolute maximum of 3 fonts. Any more than 3 fonts is going to make things look chaotic and just make it really difficult on your audience. And you want to use them in a logical way. We'll talk about that more next week. But for now, just know, don't go crazy with mixing and matching fonts, because it's going to detract from the content of your document. I've changed the font. We also have our font size here. If I click on this, so right now the default is 11. If you were just writing a business letter or something like that, 11 is the standard font size that you want to use. But you can make it a little higher if you want to, if you need the text to be bigger, by selecting just one of these other numbers. Or you can even type a number in up here. Like if I look at this list, it goes from 36 to 48. Let's say I want to be smack dab in the middle and go with 42. What I'm going to do is just type 42 up at the top here, press enter, and now it changes the font to be exactly that size. You can also do that with the font itself, by the way. If I wanted to change this to a different one, then I can click up here and start typing the name of a font. And once it pops up, I can just press enter to lock it in and change it to that font. If I want to change the size gradually, I've got this larger A with the up arrow and the smaller A with the down arrow right here. As you might imagine, the larger A with the up arrow makes your font size larger, and the smaller A with the down arrow makes your font size smaller. And it just goes in the increments that are listed in this menu right here. So if I click down right now, it's going to go to 36, and then it's going to go to 28, and so on and so forth. If I click it up twice, it's going to go back. It's going to go to 48. There we go. Lovely. All right. So next to that is the change case button. If I click on this with text selected, you'll notice I have a bunch of options for basically just changing the capitalization of the words in the selected text. So sentence case is going to capitalize only the first letter and maybe some proper nouns. So it leaves the I'm alone. But anything that it doesn't recognize as obviously needing to be capitalized, it probably won't leave it capitalized. And in general, it's just going to capitalize the first letter of each sentence like you normally would. If I click lowercase, then it's going to make everything lowercase, even stuff that normally should be capitalized. Uppercase, same deal in reverse. Capitalize each word is exactly what it sounds like, of course. And toggle case makes everything that was capital lowercase and everything that was lowercase capital. So if you're working with someone who's not terribly consistent with capitalization, then this is going to be a lifesaver for you. Or if you're taking text that was written in all caps or in all lowercase and you're trying to incorporate it in a more polished document, this is lovely. So that's your change case button. I'm going to go ahead and click here. So one thing that I haven't mentioned so far, but it's worth mentioning, is there's this blinking line right here. This is known as the cursor. And wherever that cursor is, if you start typing, text is going to appear there. So like that. You can also move this around using the arrow keys on your keyboard, those up, down, left, and right keys. So if I hit the right arrow, it moves across this space next to the eye. Hit it again, it moves next to the, or it moves to the other side of the eye. And you can also move the cursor around by clicking in the wherever among the text you need the cursor to be. It's pretty useful. Okay, so there we go. I'll reselect my text and let's talk about some of these other format options. So down here underneath the name of the font, I am skipping this one, the A with the little eraser next to it for right now. We'll come back to that in a sec. This B button here down underneath the name of my font, if I click on that, then it's going to make my text bold. If I click it again, if I click it again with text that's already bold, then it's going to unbold my text. Italics is the I, same thing. The U is underlining. If I click that, then it's going to underline. Click it again, it underlines. If I click the drop down arrow here, you'll see there are a bunch of different options for underlining. You could do a double underline, you could do it like a thicker line, you could do dotted lines of various sorts. Whichever one you choose is going to be, whichever one you choose is going to show this, or whichever one you choose is going to have, or is going to become the new default. So if I go over here, select this and click it again, you'll notice I get the dashed underline there as well. Click it again to get rid of it. So that's going to become the new default version right here. And then if I go back here, I can use the regular one. You also have strike through if you want text in your document that's crossed out. And you have what's called subscript and superscript. Now these are mostly used for things like math and chemistry and stuff like that. This one, subscript, I can't think of any places where this is typically used in just regular writing. In chemistry, it's used for, I don't remember, something to do with how many molecules of something there are. And then it's used for logarithms in math. But your superscript actually does have some kind of regular text functions, in addition to being like exponents in math and things like that. The most common form of superscript that you might not really think about is something like this. When I type July 4th like this, I've got 4th, but when I press the space bar, you'll notice that Word automatically converts the th into superscript. That makes it look a little nicer and more polished. And you'll notice if I select this text, then it has the superscript here. Now, if I want to change it back, I can click this to make it for th, just regular style again. Or if it changes something like this and you don't want that to change, you can actually click undo, and it'll undo what it calls auto format, which is basically making little stylistic changes like this to make things look cleaner. So I can undo the auto format there. But that's something that Word does by default. You don't necessarily have to do that manually. But if you want to get text like this that's sort of less common, something that's not essentially the ending of a number, then you might need to use superscript to do that. And there are various other auto formats that, that Word does. For example, an M dash, like that. So if I put hyphen, hyphen, it turns it into what's called this little line, which is called an M dash, which has a slightly different meaning grammatically speaking. Cool. All right, so let's keep going. There are a few other little formatting options here. This A that's kind of glowing, that's the text effects and typography button. When I click on this, then it gives me a whole bunch of options I can use to change the look of my text here. I can give it this kind of cutout look here. I can add an outline and a kind of a blue or purple maybe glow. I can do this, this gold one. So it has like a dark gold outline and then a lighter gold on the inside. That's actually what we call a gradient, where it fades from one color to another. You can add a reflection underneath it. You can add drop shadows behind your text like this, all kinds of cool stuff. So you can use one of these pre-made options, or you can come down here and change each of those settings individually. So add an outline or have no outline like we do now. Add a shadow, add a reflection, a glow around it. Ligatures, there are certain fonts that have letters that can be connected together. So it looks a little bit more like you're writing it by hand, or maybe looks a little fancier. And you can turn ligatures on and off in this menu here. So that's kind of cool. Some fonts support that more than others. And some fonts also have what are called stylistic sets, where certain sequences of characters, you can make them look a special way, or number styles where they can make numbers look a certain way, like this, where it says 1, 2, and then it has the 3 kind of offset a little bit. So you can make those changes just depending on what font you're using. Let's skip over this for a moment and come back to it. This A with the red color swatch underneath it, if I click on that, it's going to make my text red. If I click on the drop down arrow next to the A, then it's going to give me this menu where I can choose whatever color I want for my text instead. So I can choose from any of the colors that are here, or I can come down here, click more colors and pick one, like mix my own, or I can even come down here and make a gradient, which will fade from one color to another like we saw earlier. I made all these changes to my text. Let's say that I am like, okay, I went a little overboard with this. I really need it to look kind of more normal. If that's the case, I can sort of start over and make the text look like the rest of the text where I didn't make changes in the document. And the way I do that is by coming up here to this A with the eraser next to it and clicking on that. That's the clear all formatting button. So all of these changes that I made, they're going to be erased, and the font size, bold, italics, and underlining, the colors, all of that stuff is going to go back to the default setting, to the way that it was before. I'm going to undo that though. Okay, so there's one additional thing to talk about in this section, and that is the highlighter tool right here. And that's a little bit different from the other stuff that we've talked about. Now, if I have text selected here and I click the highlighter button, it is going to highlight the text in yellow. And it also deselects it. You'll notice it's no longer shaded in gray. It's got this yellow, like just as though I took a giant highlighter pen and went, but it is deselected. If I want to remove the highlighting, I'll have to reselect it and then click the highlighter again. But I can also click on this button while I don't have any text selected. And when I click on it, it shades the button in gray. And then I can come down here. You'll notice my mouse pointer looks like it normally does when I'm working inside the body of my document, but it also has a little highlighter marker next to it. If I take this and drag over as though I was going to select some text, When I let go, instead of selecting it, it highlights the text. The highlighting, or in order to get out of highlighter mode, I have to come back up here and click the button again. The highlighting also isn't removed if I use this clear all formats button up here at the top. So I can click that all day long, it's not gonna work. The only thing to do if I want to get the highlighting off here is select it and click the button again. Or if I'm already in highlighter mode, then I can re-highlight the text and that will remove the highlighting from it. So just don't want you to get confused about that. It works a little bit differently than the rest of this stuff. If I click the drop-down arrow here, I can also change the color of my highlighter. All right. So let's talk about these paragraph options here, and then we'll move on to some stuff that's a little bit different. So here in this paragraph area, we've got our we've got a few useful options. Actually, you know what? I'm going to clear the formatting here because we need this to blend in more with the rest of the paragraph. Okay. When I have my cursor somewhere inside of a paragraph or next to it or whatever, making changes in this paragraph area applies those changes to the whole paragraph. So just be aware of that. If you want to apply something to multiple paragraphs, then you can select the paragraphs using your mouse. But if you just want to apply the changes to one particular paragraph, then just put your cursor anywhere in that paragraph and you're good to go. So down here at the bottom, let's start with these. There's a little button that's shaded in gray here, and that's the Align Left button. By default, when you open up Word and just start typing in a document, your text is aligned along the left-hand margin. And in most recent versions of Word, the left-hand margin is 1 inch from the left side of the paper. My text is aligned along the left-hand margin. The spacing in between words is consistent. And so once I get to the end and there's not enough room for the next word, then the next word just moves down to the following line here. If I want my text centered though, I could click the center button right here. There we go. You'll notice now what happens is my text, my text has an equal amount of space on the left side and the right side here, and it's kind of indented on both sides here. If I click the Align Right button, then it's going to align my text along the right-hand margin of my page. So sometimes you'll need that. And then finally, there's the Justify button here. When I click on that, you'll notice it looks kind of like left align at first. But when you look at this a little more closely, you'll notice on the right-hand side, the text is also aligned with the right margin, except for this last line here. And that's exactly what the Justify button does. So in a lot of professional publications, newspapers, magazines, stuff like that, books, you'll see justified text. Basically, your text will be spaced out in such a way that it aligns along both margins, except for the very last line of each paragraph. That allows you to visually distinguish one paragraph from another, but it also gives it a kind of a cleaner look compared to just the left align, like the default setting. So again, it does that by just adjusting the amount of spacing between the words on a particular line. So when I switch from, left align, watch this line in particular, the second line here. When I switch to justified, it spaces these out so that the period lands right there at the edge of the margin. So that's nice. If you want to give your document a little bit cleaner look, that's a good way to go. Okay, so let's talk about this spacing here. This button right here, it's got these two up and down arrows, and it has some some little lines of text. When I click on that button, what it's going to do is give me a drop-down menu. And I have a bunch of different spacing options. So I have single space, 1.0, 1.15. So that gives you 15 hundredths of a line of text, or excuse me, 15 hundredths of a line height between lines of text inside your paragraph. So you'll notice strict single space looks like this. If I go to 1.15, spaces it out just a smidge, just a smidge. 1.5 gives you essentially half a line's worth of space between each line of text in the paragraph. 2.0 is double space. 2.5 is double and a half. And 3.0 is triple space. So if you need your text spaced out differently from the default, which is this 1.15, then you can change those options here. And you can also change it. You can also get in there and make it exactly what you want it to be by clicking this line spacing options setting here. And then we have add space before paragraph and remove space after paragraph. So I pointed it out earlier, but by default, whenever you start a new paragraph, when you press enter, it gives you a bit of space and then it starts the new paragraph after that. That allows you to visually, that allows the reader to separate paragraphs visually at a glance without you having to resort to indenting the beginning of every paragraph or things like that. And so you can use this to, so by default, it's going to do that. If you don't like that behavior, or if you need that, if you need Word not to do that, because you're using some sort of style guide that requires you not to have that happen, you can just click here and click remove space after paragraph. Now it's still showing up here, so I could select all of these paragraphs and come up here again and go, I'll go add space after paragraph and then remove space after paragraph. So that's going to make sure that they stick together like that. If I, come on now, I'll put that back the way it was. If I choose add space before paragraph, then at the beginning of each paragraph, it's going to add a little bit of space. If I have it in addition to the space after paragraphs, then it's going to give me a big gap right here. So you usually want to do one or the other if you're using these options. But and after makes more sense, particularly for the first paragraph. I add space before paragraph, it's just going to give me some extra white space here at the top, which I don't really need. So I'm just kind of wasting my part of my page there. So those are your line spacing and paragraph spacing options. Okay, let's take a look at up here at the top, our list options. So let's say that I want to write a list. Let's say I'm going to do a list of, I don't know, Star Wars characters. There we go. Okay, good. Got a nice list going there. So here's so when I look at this, it looks kind of bad. It's hard to tell that this is supposed to be a list. It looks more like I just started writing some paragraphs and gave up. So I want to visually distinguish this again from the rest of my document. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to select the text here. So I'm going to drag with my mouse, hold down with the mouse button and drag over. And then I'm going to come up here to the top and I'm going to click this bullets button right here. When I do that, you'll notice it changes the spacing between each of my line items. And it also gives me, it indents things. And it also gives me a bullet point before each item on the list. And if I try to add additional items, I can just go to the end of a line, you know, with the item before where I want to put the new item, press enter, and it'll automatically give me a new bullet point, and I can type in. Lovely. Okay, so I've got, so I now have my, my list here. If I want to drop an item in the middle, again, I can just click at the end of an item there and press enter, and it'll give me a new bullet point and a new blank line. If I want to delete an item, I'll just backspace it, and that'll work just fine. Or I can even just select the whole thing and there we go. Lovely. Okay, so that's a bulleted list. If I'm done writing my list, then I can press enter on the keyboard, or when I can press enter as though I'm about to start a new item on the list, and then press enter again, and that'll get me out of there. Let's say that I want to make another list. This time I'm going to list some food. So I'll press enter to start a new paragraph. And this time, rather than writing my list and then formatting it as a list, I'm going to come up here and click on the numbering button next to the bullets button straight away. When I do that, I get, again, it gets indented, and I get number 1 here, and then I can start typing my list. Press enter, gives me a new, gives me the next number and a new line. Okay, great. All right, so I've got that. I'll get out of writing the list for now. So I can also make changes to the way that this looks. So for example, I'll select this, the bulleted list here. I can click the drop-down arrow, and then I can change these, and then I can change the bullets to be a whole bunch of different types of things, these little things, or whatever that is, or a check mark, or a little chevron here. I can even click define new bullet, and I can make pretty much any character in any of my fonts on my computer into a bullet for bulleted list purposes. If I select something, then it changes it to match that. Similarly, I can change the style of my numbering here. So I can click on the drop-down arrow next to the numbering button, and I can say change it to a number with a right parenthesis there. I can change it to lettering. I can do Roman numerals, whatever I feel like. And again, I can also define a new number format. There's another thing that I can do though, which is I can change I can do what's called a multi-level list. There's a button here where I can change the format of that. So when I click on that, it gives me a bunch of options. I can do like articles and sections, or, 1 and then 1.1 and then 1.1.1 and so on. However I want it to be. But I'm going to stick with the default option. I just want to, I'm just going to turn this numbered list into a multi-level list, kind of like an outline. If I press enter after breakfast here, it's going to make lunch number 3 and dinner number 4, and it's going to give me a new blank line here. But if I want to add sort of a sub item for breakfast, what I'm going to do is press tab on the left-hand side of my keyboard, the tab key. When I do that, it indents further and gives me an A. So let's see, I can go beverages. I'll press enter again, and then I'll hit tab one more time so we can make a sub item here. Lovely. I'll press enter one more time, but I'm done listing beverages. So I actually want to go up a level here. What I'm going to do is hold shift while pressing tab. And that is going to give me a B here. So now I can say, you know, oops, held shift for too long. What would I call that anyway? I don't know. Foods, whatever. I'll press tab again, and now I can go like cereal, eggs, bacon, pancakes, fruit, etc., etc. And I could even do a sub item like oranges, apples, bananas, and I can keep going like that, obviously. Once I'm done listing all this stuff out, though, I'll go to the end of my list, press enter, and this time, because it's a multi-level list, it's a little bit different. I'll actually have to hit backspace a few times. So I'll go backspace, 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 and eventually it lines up with the margin, and there we go. All right. So that's lists. Let's go ahead and talk about some other stuff here. Let's talk briefly about using pictures in our document. Word, I will say up front, is not really a great program with handling images. I mean, it's fine. You can certainly put a picture inside your document, and if you need to occasionally, then more power to you, and I'm going to show you how to do it. But I will also say, if you're planning a document that's going to use a lot of pictures or fancy formatting, and it's going to be a strong mix of text and images, I guess I would say, then you might want to consider not using Word for that document. If you have if you have Office 365 or certain versions of Microsoft Office, you might have access to Microsoft Publisher, and that's actually going to be a better option for a document that contains more pictures, or where you're going to be designing things a lot more heavily. You can also use other software entirely. For example, Canva is a free web-based tool that you can use. That's pretty cool. C-A-N-V-A, Canva. And I do a class on that occasionally. And there are some other options. If you want to get really fancy, then you can use Adobe InDesign, but that's expensive and a little complex. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to most folks. But if you really need some heavy duty tools, and if you're planning to get, say, something published professionally or something like that, then InDesign might be a good option. But assuming that you're not doing anything particularly fancy, you just need a picture inside your document somewhere, great, let's do it. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to put my picture. I'm actually going to put it between these first two paragraphs. So I'm going to click here, press enter, and create a new line. And then I'm going to come up to the top, click on the Insert tab here, click on Pictures. And in this version of Word, what I have is I click Pictures, and it says Insert Picture from this device, Stock Images, or Online Pictures. So this device is going to be pictures that are saved on your computer. That's what I'm going to use here in a second. Stock images is going to be, these are going to be images that are free, essentially free to use, they're sort of there to specifically for people to put inside their documents or, use in their work. And then online pictures is basically just doing a search for a picture online. If you're going to be publishing anything or, creating business documents, obviously, you want to make sure that you legally have the rights to use the images that you're using. So stock images here, that's a really helpful option to have. That's pretty new. If you're just using a document internally and, just for fun or whatever, just looking for a picture online is probably fine. And of course, if it's a picture that you took or something that you drew or something that, a friend created and said you could use, then that works great. I'm going to click this device and I'm just going to browse through and find a photo of some sort. Okay, cool. There we go. There's an image that I can drop in here. Great. Okay, so when I click on, when I find an image and select it and either double click it or click open, drops it here wherever my cursor was in the document. And I can move it around if I want it somewhere slightly different. When I click and hold on this and move it around, you'll notice I get this little placeholder cursor here. I can put it exactly in the middle of this sentence if I want to. I guess this is more the middle. I'll let go. And now the picture is right there. By default, Word will essentially drop your pictures right in the middle of your document as though they were words. And so you can move them around however you want, but just know that that's the case. Like when I move one, I'm specifically picking a spot in amongst my text for my picture to be in. Actually, I'm going to put it back here because that'll help. Okay, so I can resize my image, which is pretty easy. Usually what I want to do is use the dots in the corners here. Click and drag on them. Generally speaking, don't use the dots on the edges in the middle of the edges because what that's going to do is reshape and distort the image like this. It does not look great. So I usually just pretend that these on the edges don't exist and strictly use the ones in the corners because they will resize my image proportionally like that. So we've got that in here, but it's a little weird because it's in the middle of this sentence. It's like this text is very, very, very spaced out, and this is kind of all more together in a way that looks more right. What I can do is when I have the image selected, I can click here and change my layout options. I can turn on what we call text wrapping. I can also up here at the top, if I have it selected, there's a picture format tab here, or in some versions of Word, picture tools format. I can select that, and I can make a lot of changes there as well. And text wrapping is here too. If I click square, what that's going to do is basically allow my text to flow around the image kind of squarely. If I move it a little bit toward the middle, then anyway we had a lovely picnic with a whole bunch of different wonderful food, blah, blah, blah. Okay, like that. If I change the setting to tight, it's really just going to give me less space between my text and the image, like so. It didn't change all that much. Through is going to allow the text to go through if there are certain blank spots in the image. They can't be white spots. They actually have to be spots that are cut out in the image. Transparent areas is what we call that. But if you have an image with transparency, then that will work. Top and bottom, this is a nice one. We'll just put text above as much as will fit and put text below as much as will fit. And when you move the image around, it's just going to go by whole lines of text, basically. And that's nice. And then there's behind text and in front of text, which is exactly what it sounds like. If I go behind text, then the text is going to go right on through. You'll notice it says, this is a new paragraph. It's short. All of that text is right there just on top of the image. A lot of times you won't want to do that because, as in this case, it will make your text less readable. But you can do that. There's also behind, which of course will let the image block the text. And you can change whether the image will move with the text. So if I added another paragraph up here, would it move the image down? Or if I fix the position on the page and make all the text flow around it. There's a, so there's some stuff you can do to kind of change the look of things in this picture format tab. You can click on, you can add little frames around things, or you can crop it in different ways. If you need your image to be reshaped, like not just resized like this, but actually reshaped, like if I wanted it square, then I'm going to come up here to the top. I'm actually going to turn my camera off for folks watching on the live stream for a sec. I can come up here to the top, click where it says crop, and then it gives me these little matte lines on the edges, and I can drag those in and out and around to reshape my image the way I want it to be. And then when I click out of the image, it locks that in. That's the right way to reshape your image. You don't want to reshape your image by using these dots on the edges, because again, that will distort the picture. And particularly if you have pictures of obvious geometric shapes like a circle or a square, or if you have a picture of an animal face or a human face, it'll look really bad. Yeah, do not recommend. Okay, let's see. And then I'm going to undo that cropping. Okay, someone asked to see just adding the image to the document again. I'll show you that, and then we'll move on to kind of our last bit here. So to add an image, what you do, figure out where you want it to be and put your cursor there. Go to the Insert tab at the top. And then in my version, I can click on pictures and it says this device, stock images, or online pictures. In other versions of Word, you might have a pictures button and an online pictures button. And the pictures button versus the online pictures button, online pictures will do a search of Microsoft's Bing search engine, basically. And the regular pictures button will actually get you pictures on your computer. So you click this device, and then you go wherever there's a picture, and you either click on it and click insert, or double click on it, and that will drop it into your document. I just used an image that was on my computer. I don't expect you to have this image. I don't expect anyone ever to have this image, to be honest with you. But that's the process. Okay, let's do one other thing here. What I'm going to do for the last little bit is talk about the layout or page layout tab up here. When I click on this layout tab, you'll notice I get a bunch of different options, which I mentioned just briefly earlier. I don't want to go through all of these. Some of them are not that relevant to what we need and what anyone needs most of the time when they're working in Word. But there are a couple of really useful things here. For one, I can change the margins. If I click on the margins button here, it's going to give me a drop-down menu. And the default margins in newer versions of Word are 1 inch on all sides. But if I click narrow, then you'll notice my text shifts and reflows or whatever, so that it stays, so that it kind of, let's just move this way down, so that it fills in that gap, and I only have 1/2 inch on each side of my text there. Moderate gives you 1 inch on top, 1 inch on bottom, and then 3/4 of an inch on the left and right, and so on and so forth. There's a bunch of different things you can do. There's the default, and there's custom margins, which will give you, which will allow you to like change it. I want it to be 2/3 of an inch on, the top and bottom, and then 1/3 of an inch on the left and right, or whatever. You can do just any old margins you want, as long as if you're printing it, as long as your printer can handle it. The orientation here, as I mentioned earlier, if I click on that, I can change it to landscape, basically turning the piece of paper to, on its side rather than kind of the more traditional setup. We have size, so you can actually change the physical size of the page that you're working with. So you could change it from letter size paper, which is 8.5 by 11, to legal size paper, which is 8.5 by 14, so a little bit longer. Executive paper, which is 7.25 inches wide and 10.5 inches tall. Seems inefficient to me, but I don't know. I think as an executive, maybe you'd want more space to put things in, but maybe that's why I'm not an executive. So we've got, so you can change the size of your page there, and goodness knows there are a gazillion different sizes that you could potentially pick, and you can even make your own. You also have the option of columns here. If I click on this, I can change, this will change my entire document to have some sort of column layout. So 2 columns. Mostly it just does, but if I add some additional, let me go ahead and throw in some copies of this. So I'm going to select this paragraph, go back to the Home tab and click Copy. And then I'm going to click down here underneath it and click the little clipboard for paste. And now you can see more easily, oh, hey, I've got some columns here. So let's see. So that will, layout. So that'll allow me to change my my column layout. I could go, I could have 3 columns. I can do a small column on the left and a big column on the right, or vice versa. And then I can go more columns here. One other really helpful thing to know about this is there's, let me make sure that this, yeah. So I've got this breaks area here, and you can also find most of these options I'm about to talk about on the Insert tab over here on the left. You'll see under Pages, but the design, or excuse me, the Layout or Page Layout tab is going to have all of these options in a more sort of helpful way. So few things to talk about. For one, let's get rid of these columns for now. This is gonna, okay, there we go. All right, so now I have my document here. One thing to think about is, let's say, for example, you are, you're working on a document that has multiple sections, or you're you get to the end of your, of a paper you're writing, and then you need to insert a bibliography or something. So you don't want those to be, you don't want the end of your document and the bibliography to be on the same page. Usually you want them to be on separate pages. Most folks, what they'll do, let's pretend that, well, I'll write my bibliography here. Okay. What they'll do is they'll go works cited, and they'll go okay. I might make it a better formatted list if I was being finicky, but I'm not. Okay, so usually they'll do something like this, and then to get it to the top of the next page so that it's not on the same page as the end of their paper or whatever, they'll go enter, 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 until they get it to the top of the next page. That works okay, but it's not that great. It's kind of, it can lead to problems, because let's say that I put some more text. I'm going to just copy several more of these. So copy, come down here, paste it right here. Again, I can do this up here. I can also use the keyboard shortcut, which is you hold Control and press V as in Victor on your keyboard. Okay, so I have, I've added some additional paragraphs to my paper. It wasn't long enough for the assignment. Now though, my my bibliography is moved way down the page. So now I got to come over here and go backspace, 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 until I get it to the top again. That's a hassle. I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go ahead and put this back where it was. Whoops. And I'm going to come down here next to the first line of the text that I want to be on the next page. And back on the layout tab, I'm going to click breaks, page. So I'm inserting what's called a page break. And now this is at the top of the next page. And this stays right where it was. And if I add more text in here, again, I'll copy, press enter and paste it in. Lo and behold, this stays at the top of the page. I don't have to do anything to get it back where it's supposed to be. So that's really helpful. And if I were to fill this entire page up, then what would happen is the text would overflow onto this page, and then the works cited would move down to the next page when it, and be at the beginning of it. So that's really, really useful, the page break, because it can help you with stuff like that. Let's see, let's say, okay, I'm going to select the rest of my text here. And let's go ahead, I'm going to come back up here, click on columns and click more columns. And you'll notice that I get this kind of pop-up box that allows me to set different column settings and be a little more precise with things. I'm just going to change this to 2 columns. And then I'm going to, and then I'll notice, you can notice down here, it says apply to selected text. If I click OK, then it's going to sort it into 2 columns, which there's not quite enough for 2 columns. But that's actually okay for the example that I'm about to show you. What I want to do is, I've got 6 copies of this paragraph here. What I want to do is put this one onward over here in the next column. To make that happen, what I'm going to do is click over here next to the first paragraph that I want to be in the next column. Go to breaks again, and this time I'm going to click column break. And what that's going to do is essentially put a little invisible mark in my document that says, okay, if you're in columns from this point onward, you need to switch to the next column. And that allows me to keep stuff where it needs to be. Again, if I add more text, because it's on this side of the column break, then it doesn't change what's over here until I run out of room here. And so that makes it really makes it a lot easier to deal with columns. You can see these breaks, by the way. It's useful sometimes to be able to visualize it a little bit better. If I go back to the Home tab and I click this button right here, this is the Show and Hide Paragraph Marks button. If I click on that, then it's going to give me a little paragraph mark at the end of each paragraph. It's going to show me there's a section break here that I created when I added the columns. Here's my column break, and here's the page break that makes this show up at the bottom or at the top of the next page, rather than just under the text that's on this page. And you can also do some other stuff like creating section breaks and so on and so forth. But that is pretty much it. What questions do y'all have for me before we wrap things up for today? All right. Well, I don't see anything. If you think of questions later, then please feel free to let me know. You could send me an email at digital@cals.org. Um, and of course, we'll be back here next week for Word Part 2, Styles, Mailings, and More. Also on Wednesday afternoon is part 2 of the Microsoft Excel course, which is going on over the next, over last week, this week, and the next 2 weeks. If you missed part 1, Excel is really useful, and I love teaching that Excel course. It's really interesting, and Excel. Knowing how to use Excel, it's a little intimidating at first, but knowing how to use Excel is just really extremely helpful with lots of different work-related tasks, and just, if you, and just kind of marketing yourself if you are looking for a job, things like that. So if you didn't get a chance to be there last week, that's totally okay. The first part of the Excel class is on the CALS YouTube channel. So if you go to cals.link/YouTube, then you can find the YouTube channel there, and look for Excel Part 1, and then register for Excel Part 2 on Wednesday, or register for Excel Part 2, which is on Wednesday, and join me then. I hope that you all have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully I will see you either Wednesday or next week. Have a great one. Bye.